back on Take Action News. This is Richard Eskow, RJ Eskow, and we are here reporting the news that we think you want to hear, and even if you don't, by God, you're going to hear it. Our next guest is a writer whose work I always appreciated and enjoyed, John Walker. John is here to talk to. John writes very well on health insurance, among other issues, but he's here today to talk to us about something a little different. He's here to talk to us about another area he follows closely, drug policy, and including the developments in Colorado. But anyway, John, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, well, welcome to Take Action News.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
You bet. So, drug policy. I guess the big story right now is legal weed in Colorado. Is that right? Would you say that's the headline story?
Oh, yes, most definitely. This is the first time that you've been able to legally buy marijuana as any adult. You know, you don't need a medical marijuana card or anything. You can just walk into the store, pick up some marijuana, and walk out.
Now, who is selling it? I mean, we know that, so it's legal to both sell and to buy marijuana in the state of Colorado?
Yeah, under Colorado law, you, as a regular person, can buy up to an ounce of marijuana if you're over 21, and if you're especially licensed to grow and sell marijuana, you can do that.
So you can be a licensed dealer. What about like my 7-Eleven or the guy who runs the local service station? Can he, along with, you know, I mean, a lot of those guys sell zigzag papers in some states anyway, but can he sell, along with the cigarettes and the soda and Slurpees and all that, can they sell marijuana now?
No. The rules in Colorado are very strict. It's very tightly controlled. In these first few months, the only people who can sell marijuana are people who ran medical marijuana dispensaries before that have transitioned into retail marijuana locations. But even after that initial time period is up, it will have to be a specially licensed marijuana store dedicated to selling marijuana. You won't get in your grocery store or anywhere else.
Okay, so the analog really is, it's kind of like liquor stores.
Yeah, that was how the initiative was sold. It was regulate marijuana like alcohol. That was the name of the initiative, and that's very much what they're doing.
Okay, because I'm based most of the time in California, although I travel back east a lot to Washington and New York. But in California, as you know, they have the legal marijuana pharmacies, which are everywhere, and the definition of the pharmacy, gets stretched a lot. There are even, specialty restaurants included in one or two of the most upscale places, but you still need a prescription. So the difference really is that now in Colorado, anybody can walk into one of these licensed stores and buy marijuana. Now, it's gotten a lot of headlines without a lot of detail. That's one of the reasons why I've asked you a lot of the these backup questions, these background questions. Is there any word yet on how it's being received by the Colorado public? We know it passed. We know it received a majority vote. Are people accepting this fairly calmly, or just kind of going about their business? Is there any social group complaining that it's socially disruptive or immoral? Are there protests, or has it been a very smooth transition?
Yeah, so far it appears to have gone very smoothly. I think there's some recent polling in Colorado that found people's opinion about marijuana has basically been unchanged since last year when they voted for it. So, there hasn't really been an increase or decrease in support at all. And besides sort of some long lines outside the stores, there hasn't seemed to be any, issues or problems that have emerged in these first 3 days.
So, okay, and then I guess the next question it would be reasonable to ask is, now you follow this area closely, would you consider the Colorado law to be something that could be used as a model for other states?
Oh, yeah, no, they very much designed it with that goal in mind, the people who drafted it. And we're actually seeing all over the country very similar versions or very similar laws to it, either being put on the ballot or being debated in the legislature. So I think, like in Alaska, most likely will be on the primary ballot is almost identical ballot measure, very similar to how Colorado's is designed. And I think some representatives in New Hampshire are putting in almost an identical measure, before the legislature there this year. And yeah, it was always intended to be a model piece of legislation. Obviously, once we see what's happening in Colorado, we'll probably make some changes depending on how well things are going. But this is very likely what we'll see across the country.
So I guess then let's talk on the national level for a second. Then I guess, it's interesting because the gay marriage, I see analogies with the gay marriage battle in a sense, which is that also represented a kind of social change. That was also a struggle that was waged primarily at the state level. And what seemed to happen is that an idea that seemed socially unacceptable for decades, suddenly it was as if a dam had burst and state after state flipped, and suddenly it was socially acceptable where it hadn't been. Do you see something like that also happening with the marijuana legalization movement?
Oh yeah, and it's actually very fascinating. If you look at the polling of support for same-sex marriage and the polling of support for marijuana legalization, they've almost traveled in parallel for 20 years now. They've almost been identical in both, the overall level of support and, sort of the demographic groups that support them. It tends to be young, liberal people who are most supportive of both. And we have seen just an incredible tipping point in the polling for marijuana legalization. Good 8 years ago, it was only, or 10 years ago, it was only about 30% of the country supported legalization. Now it's well over a majority. And it seems to be growing by, 2, 3, 4 percentage points every year. We could easily be up to, 65% of the country supporting legalization within the next 5, 6 years.
So what do you see in the minute or two we have left? I've got two topics. I'll give you a choice of which one to pick. One would be what the upcoming battleground states are, and two is David Brooks's a very hard to parse column of this weekend, where he basically said that he didn't think he smoked marijuana when he was young, but he didn't think it should be legal for reasons that weren't entirely clear to me. So I'd love to hear from you on either or both topics in the minute or two we have left.
Yeah, as best as I can tell from Brooks' column, he was sort of upset that legalization would send some moral message that people would be getting high instead of striving to go to the opera or something. I find it very disgusting, because if we really want to talk morality in the war on marijuana, we've got African Americans smoking at the same rates as white people, yet getting arrested 4 times more. We've got rank hypocrisy where the last 3 presidents, much of Congress, all did marijuana when they were younger. I doubt any of them would say that using marijuana was more damaging to them than being arrested for marijuana would have been. Here we've got President Obama supporting a system that probably would have kept him from being president if he was actually caught up in it. And then finally, the whole idea of just putting people in cages because they're smoking a harmless plant. It seems like one of the most immoral things I could think of. But, David Brooks wants us to pursue higher pursuits or something. So we got to, waste a few $1 billion a year on a failed policy.
Well, John Walker, I think I don't think anybody could have put it better. I think that, first of all, in a nation that celebrates drinking, it's very hard to condemn marijuana smoking. I don't happen to do either anymore, but it's very hard for me to justify that point of view. And I certainly, in a nation, and if you're David Brooks, who talks about nothing except deficit reduction and reducing government spending week after week after week, why are we spending so much money incarcerating minority youth immorally, unethically, prejudicially, and for no constructive social reasons? So, John, thanks so much for being with us. I hope you'll come back sometime. I really enjoyed having you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
You bet. All right, this is Take Action News. We will be back after the break with more news you can take action on, hence the name. I'm Richard Eskow, RJ Eskow. Stick with us. We'll be back in a minute.